Morning, good evening, depending on the attendees' local time. Welcome to the first international conference on the international law, CONIDIN 2025. We have the pleasure to inaugurate our conference program with our guest speaker, Ibrahim Josh Aoude. Welcome, Ibrahim, and thank you for accepting our invitation and for dedicating your time to us in this first international conference on the international law.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and I'm happy that I am going to talk with you, discuss important questions. I hope that the audience would find interesting and appealing to them.
Okay, thank you. So I will greet you in Arabic. أهلا وسهلا إبراهيم ونشكرك على قبول دعوتنا وعلى تخصيص وقتك لنا. Thank you.
يا هلا وشكرا جزيلا للاستضافة.
Okay, so let's talk about Palestinian liberation in the global context. And start with you, Ibrahim Josh Aoude. But before to address the topic, please, will you kindly introduce yourself? I know you, but some to have an overview for our attendees.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm happy to do so. I'm Ibrahim George Aoude. I'm Palestinian. I grew up in Lebanon, and I'm also Lebanese, I'm Professor Emeritus at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. That's the main campus, at the Department of Ethnic Studies. And it's been 4 years since I retired, but I happen to still have my office on campus, so because I go there sometimes and do work and all of that. And I taught a course on the Middle East. I'm a political scientist, by the way. I taught a course on the Middle East at the Department of Ethnic Studies, but also taught courses on Hawaii, economic change and Hawaii's people, Hawaii and the Pacific, social movements in Hawaii, and a lot of others, like about 10, 11 different courses. I am the editor-in-chief of Arab Studies Quarterly. It's been like, I think, the year 20 as editor-in-chief. And this Arab Studies Quarterly is an important international journal, and very popular, and has a lot of people access it quite a bit, a lot, in fact, yeah. So that's, I'm still working, reading, writing, and all of that. So much more busier now than I was when I was teaching.
Okay, so it's wonderful, Ibrahim. So let's start this by October 7, 2023. How would you describe the struggle for Palestinian liberation before October 7?
Yeah, that's, I thought, that's an interesting question. Because we can go back to like 100 years ago, but I don't want to do so. I would begin with, the Oslo Accords, because this is a critical juncture in Palestinian history. And the Oslo Accords basically occurred because of two reasons, main reasons. One, the strategic defeat of the Palestine Liberation Organization in Beirut in 1982, and it's they evacuated most of the forces, at least, to Tunisia and other Arab countries. That's one. And then in 1987, December 8, 1987, the first Intifada, which was peaceful Intifada, because, they only had rocks. And the Israeli or the Zionist entity in Palestine, quote unquote Israel, retaliated in like a beastly manner wiping out a lot of people and jailing them, breaking bones, and the rest of it. So that intifada, which was extremely popular, and most sectors or all sectors of Palestinian society in the West Bank and Gaza participated in it. However, it basically was co-opted by the Palestinian bourgeoisie and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and it went downhill. The September 13th, 1993, Oslo Accord at the Rose Garden at the White House were like two criminals, Israeli criminals, and Yasser Arafat shook hands, and that was very interesting, to do so. This, it had like quite a bit of popularity at first, because the Palestinians said, "Oh, at least we'll have, something like a two-state, whatever." Many of us, including me, I mean, we were working against that Oslo Accord because we knew what it was. It was a cooptation of the liberation struggle, etc., because the Palestinian bourgeoisie wanted to have a two-state solution so that they might have like, they were dreaming of having, a state on basically 22% of historic Palestine, which is like a catastrophe, for the Palestinians. But what they wanted to do so that they can have, a place where they can begin their capitalist projects, etc., in collaboration with the Zionist entity in Palestine and, United States and all of that, thinking that they would do well in that respect. But what happened, just jumping to now, I mean, nobody cares about Abu Mazen, who is a traitor as far as I'm concerned, and the collaborationist Palestinian police, etc. They jail and kill and tell on other fighters to the Israelis, and the Israelis, they catch them, they kill them, put them in jail, what have you. So it was basically a disaster that way. But going back to the 2006, 1993, the Oslo Accord. I want to, before 2006, I would go to Gaza, Jericho first, August 1st, 1994. In fact, I was in Egypt at the time, in Cairo, and one Egyptian, what I call from the loyal opposition, he was joking with me. He was like a head of a political party, their loyal opposition. He was joking with me. He said, "Why aren't you in Gaza?" At that time celebrating, Gaza, Jericho first. I said, "Well, because it's a small place, it's not gonna, I wouldn't find a place to stand over there because it's very small. It's not Palestine, you know what I'm saying? But he knew where I was standing, at any rate, Gaza Jericho first was also like, a scandal as far as I'm concerned, losing a lot of Palestine just for the bourgeoisie to have, place to do business, etc. The other thing, like in 2006, when because of the corruption in the Palestinian Liberation Organization and also the Palestinian National Authority, or what we call also for short the Palestinian Authority, they were corrupt, and the rest of it, collaborationists, traitors, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as many of us Palestinian activists and intellectuals, etc., are concerned. Because of that, Hamas won. The Palestinian, council, and had to establish a government. They formed a government, and after that, all hell broke loose. There was boycott and siege on Gaza, etc. And the rest of it was downhill. And so the Gazans were separated then from the West Bank, and then the Israeli the Zionist entity in Palestine attacked them multiple times, like 2008, 2009, the first attack. It was genocide. But not to the extent that, genocide after October 7th happened, but it was genocide, 2007, 2008, 2012, 2014, 2021, Al-Aqsa Intifada, happened, which was an important thing, in the history of Palestinian liberation. The Al-Aqsa Intifada really was instrumental in moving the Palestinian struggle for liberation to a more positive track, put it on a more positive track. That, and then 2022, when the Israelis attacked Gaza, saying that they were just attacking Islamic Jihad and no one else, and so forth. So the Palestinians have been subjected to ethnic cleansing, to siege, to all kinds of internationally illegal actions by the Zionist entity in Palestine. And so it was just completely an awful situation, So that was before October 7. I didn't go all the way back. I started basically from the Oslo Accord of September 13th, 1993.
Thank you, Ibrahim. It's really too sad to be back at the history and what's happened in Palestine. But however, we'll be back to 7 October and to link it with the Palestinian liberation. For over a century, the Palestinian people have been fighting colonial oppression, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. In what way has October 7 changed the trajectory of Palestinian liberation?
Yeah, well, before October 7th, basically, with the Trump first term, and then the so-called Abrahamic, accords and all of that, UAE, Bahrain, for instance, and Saudi Arabia was on the cusp of going in there, but MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, was a bit smart, figured out, it's not good for him, in the long run, or even in the intermediate run. So he said either, we would do it, but we need a two-state solution. And before October 7th, even a two-state solution, no one was talking about it. It went down the tubes, you see, this two-state solution. But after October 7th, what October 7th did, put Palestine liberation and the Palestinian, I hate to say question, but the Palestinian topic on the table internationally. And the proof of that, the next day, all leaders, Western leaders, Biden and the rest of them, French, everything went to Palestine in support of the Zionist entity in Palestine. And so there was like Why? Because they figured out if October 7th happened and the Israelis couldn't do anything about it, about the attack, then, the Zionist entity would lose or could lose its function, and its role as, an advanced, base for especially U.S. Plans and strategy in the area. So that would be, from a geostrategic position, is not good for the United States, not to mention Europe and so on. So that's why they all came to, rescue the Zionist entity in Palestine. And then in terms of the fighting, etc., despite all the losses that we had in, as Palestinians in Gaza because genocide and the rest of it, the Israelis, Israeli occupation forces, they call them defense forces, but occupation forces, they couldn't do anything to achieve strategic goals that they had announced as the goals for Gaza, and all they could do is just wipe out Palestinians, on a daily basis when the world was watching, and that's one, it's a negative thing. But at least, the Palestinian forces, and when we say Palestinian Liberation Forces, I'll show you something with the Western media. They say Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. It wasn't Hamas. Hamas was the largest, yeah, but there were at least 13, 14 other groups fighting, and some of them are secular, like the Popular Front for the Liberation in Palestine, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Others, there were other, forces like Islamic Jihad. Hamas was an Islamic organization, etc. But they all united, in terms of the question of liberation, to fight the Israeli or, the Zionist onslaught, And so that was an important, development, that we, all Palestinian fighting forces, coming together, coalescing to fight. And this hasn't happened before, um, in multiple ways, and also didn't happen in the West Bank, which we now begin to call East Palestine rather than the West Bank. Be that as it may, the fact of the matter is that people started now, the US and others started talking about a two-state solution, so they brought it back just as a gimmick, to try and quiet or assuage as many Palestinian, people as possible, like, oh, let's go with the two-state solution, etc. But the Palestinians do not no longer believe in a two-state solution, except those people who belong to Mahmoud Abbas, the traitor, and the others in the Palestinian Authority. And so Mahmoud Abbas is like, his position is not really solid any longer. Even the Netanyahu, he just doesn't deal with them anymore, So that shows that the Palestinian struggle for liberation has moved forward in that respect. Beyond that, globally speaking, because part of the war is the propaganda war. When you have like millions all over the world in almost all countries talking about Palestina Libre, for instance, that means a lot, And as far as I'm concerned, as a Palestinian, I see that, that overwhelming support for Palestine all over is part of the struggle for Palestinian liberation. So it is no longer, only the Palestinian fighting for Palestinian liberation, but the population, and in terms of the propaganda war, the Palestinian had won the propaganda war, as we can see. This is like, parenthetically speaking, the the problem that really put a dent in this, or maybe more than a dent, is what happened on Sunday, December 14th, 2025, in Australia at the Bondi Beach. Because, the massacre that happened at the Bondi Beach against Jews celebrating, whatever they were celebrating. And then you had the propaganda machine again, Zionist propaganda machine, etc., talking about this, Bondi, and forgetting about everything that they did in terms of genocide, and all of that thing. But what I know about this, and this is information from yesterday, or a couple of days ago, that they still people are aware of what's happening and how the Australian government is supporting the Zionist entity in this regard, to try and quiet any kind of dissent and support for Palestine. But in terms of the groups that are, forming in support of Palestine, etc., they are still pretty strong in Australia. But that Bondi thing made more than a dent in the propaganda war. But at this point, I don't think the Zionist entity and the Zionists worldwide would be able to move the pendulum to the other side, at least not as easily as they might have done before. So this is quite a win, and therefore we have moved forward after October 7th, and all the American bombs and the Zionists can do, or had been able to do, is kill Palestinians. I mean, this is something we cannot, do anything about. What can we do? He's killing Palestinians, he's killing Lebanese, now in the south of Lebanon and the Beqa and the rest of it. Israel is, out of control and enabled by another guy out of control, Trump in the United States.
Yeah, the issue just yesterday, the dream was to liberate Palestine, but today the dream is also to liberate Syria. So since the fall of the Assad regime and the rise to power in Syria to those previously identified as terrorists, the Zionist entity in Palestine has expanded to include huge territory of both Syria and Lebanon, accompanied by daily air attacks and the shelling against civilians. So, in your opinion, to what extent have those events increased the world danger regionally?
Well, I mean, when December 8, 2024, the Assad regime had fallen. We don't know the whole story, how it fell, etc. But there was corruption and there was intrigue and, all kinds of treachery and the rest of it. The role of big powers, we don't know, except medium powers. We know the role of Turkey. Turkey was the spearhead in that one. That's why I don't trust Erdogan or AKP, his political party, more than I can throw a stone. You know what I'm saying? I don't trust them at all. But the thing in this regard is that the Zionist entity has expanded, right? has been expanding in Syria, like at least 3 provinces plus a bunch of other things that they happened, like they're supporting the Druze, after the massacre that happened. I mean, thousands of people died, etc. But you see, they take advantage of the situation, the Zionists, and they say, okay, we want to protect the Druze. They don't give a hoot about the Druze or anyone else. They just use them so that they can have more influence in Syria and so forth. But the important thing, in this regard, is that the Syrian regime, they are terrorists. They were Al Qaeda, and this guy was also with ISIS before, and then all of a sudden they cleaned them up, and Trump put some perfume on him, and they become okay. No $10 million on his head any longer. So this is like, shows you how ridiculous the whole situation is, and it is power that determines what's happening. U.S. power, basically, with the Brits helping, and maybe the French and the Germans, of course. So this kind of thing shows that, in fact, the danger of war has increased. Proof: June attack 2025 on Iran, right? I mean, that was, the war danger is with us. I mean, we in Lebanon are still at war, despite the quote-unquote ceasefire. It was stopped from only the resistance, the ceasefire, but the Israeli Zionist entity is still moving, with, I just mentioned the Beqa', and all of that. They have expanded so much beyond the 3 provinces, etc. We have Mount Hermon, we call it in Arabic Jabal al-Sheikh. Jabal al-Sheikh, Mount Hermon, the Zionists had occupied it from both sides, from the Syrian side and from the Lebanese side. So they had increased their occupation of Lebanese territory as well, and not only Jabal al-Sheikh and the Sab'a farms, and the rest of it, but also they are in at least 5 to 8 different areas. We call them erroneously. We look, the Lebanese term them as points of occupation. These are not points. These are areas, So, and they are all connected. So, I mean, they have occupied more of Lebanon, than before. So that now everybody talking now, are they going to attack Iran again or Lebanon first, and all of that. As far as I'm concerned, the war danger is increasing, and we don't know how it might continue. But we also know that the recent events in Iran after the June 13th, attacks by the Zionist forces and the United States, they had like internal turmoil inside, and all over, people know that it is the U.S. and the Starlink. They caught 40,000 Starlink components, or systems, to guide the opposition and so forth. But a lot of them got wiped out, So that means that the Americans, they're not gonna stop. If they fail, they're gonna continue. So as long as there is such an imperial power that wants to, come what may, maintain or try to recoup its own unilateral position and dominant position in the global capitalist system, they're going to keep doing it. And the Zionist entity in Palestine is one of those instruments they use, the main instruments they use. And that has to do with the question of global capitalism and the crisis in global capitalism.
So, talking about the global popular solidarity against the genocide in Gaza, it has been definitely instrumental in marginalizing the Zionist narrative and elevating a revived, potent, and pervasive Palestinian narrative of liberation across the global. So one can describe this solidarity as part of the Palestinian narrative, of which the global Sumud flotilla was one of its best manifestation. How do you comment that?
Yeah, I mean, the global Sumud flotilla is, was huge, 40, 50 ships, however many. And then how the Zionist entity in Palestine looked at it, and they started bombing it even before they took off from the harbors, Tunisia and so forth. So that was something. We had one female from here, from another island, Kauai Island. I am on Oahu, which is the main island where the capital Honolulu is. She was part of the global Sumud flotilla. And, I met her here when she came back, etc. And we talked, and we invited her to talk for a group of, people, Hawaii for Palestine groups and so forth on different islands. So, I mean, she tells you stories that, raise your hair, as we say in Arabic. But the other thing, this is not the first one. We have like Anne Wright, and she is well known in the international community in terms of like flotillas, From the first flotilla, she was on the first flotilla in 2010, and so on. So there is now preparing for another flotilla, right now it's happening. I don't know when it's going to happen, etc. I mean, start moving, sailing. But there's that preparation. And we in Hawaii, just parenthetically, a lot of people think like Hawaii is the, the backdrop of empire, of the empire. It's like, the back door or whatever. But in fact, we are the front door of empire. Why? Because we have the Pacific Command in Hawaii, and the Pacific Command has, responsibility. It's all the way to the Arab Sea, So, and a lot of forces that went like, the occupation of Iraq or Desert Storm, they went from Hawaii. And Hawaii is a huge military, we have huge military installations. So we are not the backdrop of empire, we are the front door of empire, because of the Pacific is very important now, especially in terms of China and Taiwan and the rest of it. But that was parenthetically speaking. So we are also very active in terms of the flotilla from here, because of Anne Wright. She lives here, and she was a colonel in the armed forces, U.S. armed forces, and she was a diplomat, and she retired as a diplomat. Not retired. She resigned as a diplomat because of what was happening in Iraq, and since then she was acting against U.S. policy, etc., and having a very active role. And she's now 79 years old, but she's very active. And we have others, here in Hawaii.
So let's move to the economic interests. Western capitalism is undergoing a serious political and economic crisis. In what way have the US global hegemon utilized the lethal power like military, economic, political, diplomatic, and cultural in West Asia and North Africa in an attempt to regain the hegemonic status globally?
Yeah. I will start by saying hegemony is no more for the US because it's a declining empire. That's one. And, people say, well, we still have the strongest military, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, you have strongest military and high-tech stuff and all of that kind of thing. However, when you have $38 trillion in debt, and you cannot really keep financing and refinancing it, then you are in trouble. I mean, even before the $38 trillion in debt, the 2008 global financial crisis really almost broke the backbone of U.S. capitalism, U.S. global capitalism. And in my judgment, the U.S. has not completely, gotten out of that crisis. Okay, because we have now more bubbles than the real estate bubble that was punctured in 2008. So there are other bubbles that might be punctured as well. When we have no idea, but. Another thing that is critical now is that we have like short-term debt, long-term debt, right? Okay. Now the U.S. is moving long-term debt into short-term debt so that they can, move away from long-term debt into the short. But when you have short-term debt, you have to refinance it. But if you have a problem, fiscal problem and monetary problem, because the dollar is not as strong as it used to be before, then how are you going to refinance the short-term debt, you see? There's a theory that says that, this way, Trump would move this short-term debt into some kind of Bitcoin or whatever, and then he says something like, well, this Bitcoin is no good, and then he cancels all the debt that he has, But this is like some ideas about this. People are afraid of this kind of stuff. This is the latest from someone who knows what he was talking about, what he's talking about, and I got that kind of information. The global capitalist system is still in crisis, a huge crisis. You have like, the things that the United States has been has done, like in Venezuela, for instance, and other places, we can talk about the Sudan and, other places in Africa, Nigeria, etc. It shows that they are really in trouble because they want to try to counter the BRICS, and then that BRICS, although like all kinds of countries are in it, like the United Arab Emirates, which is pro-Israel, and Saudi Arabia, etc. But at least these guys are also trying to figure out ways to protect their own interests as well, away from the United States. I mean, they have a margin of motion that they can move. They're trying to use it, but ultimately they could go back to, what the United States wants, forces them to do. But at least they are trying. Brazil is one, another one, South Africa, etc. Despite all the problems with the individual BRIC countries, the BRICS countries. So
So then the question of like the United States, in terms of trying to counter this kind of crisis as much as possible, is now trying to stabilize the Zionist entity in Palestine, one, so that it can take over the West Asia, at least, maybe some parts of North Africa, like we're talking about Sudan now, not South Sudan, but Sudan, and all these things that are happening. Like, I mean, millions are, dying and displaced and homeless, and it's just an awful situation. Actually, it's worse than Gaza, except that Gaza is being bombed by another entity with the help of the United States, or in participation of the United States. But in terms of the Sudan, two fighting forces are Sudanese, but of course, egged on by the U.S. and the Zionist entity and so forth. So that kind of crisis is critical, because if they're trying to stabilize, the U.S. trying to stabilize Israel, the Zionist entity, and so that they would leave the West Asia under control of the Zionist entity, then the U.S. can go back to the Pacific against China and so forth. Like foreign foreign affairs, there's an article talking about, for instance, the United States has to figure out a way to bring India to it, bring India to it, because India, is like, on the horns of a dilemma, I mean, which way to go, etc. And the Americans are not helping India to make a decision to go to the U.S., So, I mean, this is, I mean, to me, I think it's idiotic, what the Americans are doing. But they cannot help themselves, because they are arrogant, they have so much hubris. And if they were, an individual narcissistic, and this, by the way, this narcissism in terms of the United States occurs in terms of, or you can manifest itself in terms of the notion that there is American exceptionalism, that we are exceptional, which means to me that laws of history are for everyone else, but not the United States, because we have our own laws of history, so they are not part of the world. They have like different laws of history because they are exceptional, huge country, and the rest of it. But this is nonsense. American exceptionalism is the kind of narcissism if the U.S. were to be an individual. So now the countering this is, of course, China and Russia, the Russian Federation. So the war, going back to the previous question also, the war danger is now even more, probable, given that situation with the crisis of capitalism, global capitalism, etc. The United States would keep doing one thing after another. If it fails, it's going to continue to do that until such times that it hopes, that it would regain its unilateral dominant position in the global capitalist system. But no one force can do anything about that, because the global capitalist system is undergoing crisis one after the other.
Okay, I will go back to the 7th October. It said that October 7th has created an international political earthquake in the way that the US hegemon and the West in general have reacted to it. the genocide that result immediately, the Russia has thrown out international law in all of its variety, international humanitarian law and etc. So the Russian Federation, the Federation and China have also been involved in West Asia and North Africa prior to and after October 7. How would you describe those dynamics as you bring this interview to conclusion?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the question of Russia and China. I mean, we're not talking about like little kids on the block. I mean, these are huge, huge powers, militarily, especially the Russian Federation, economically, of course, China. And so one of the reasons that the U.S. has been doing that which is doing, like, Venezuela, etc., is because wants to block China from, access to oil, hence Venezuela, for instance. Moving into, the Gulf area, they're trying to figure out ways of taking over, oil in the Gulf, at least, yeah. So in doing that kind of motion, you are like competing. I'm not competing, but having animosity with China. You see, and if you do have an animosity of China with China, that means war danger is gonna continue and escalate. And if you cannot solve the question of the Ukraine and NATO expansion towards Russian borders, then you have another problem in terms of war danger. Especially now we know that the Europeans are trying to continue the fight against Russia. But I mean, it's like losing, losing proposition, because already, so far as I look at things, the war in Ukraine is basically finished. It's just like a matter of cleaning up. And as you are cleaning up, the Brits and the Germans and the French, etc., trying to increase, their own involvement to try and do that which is impossible, which is defeating the Russians at this point. This is like nuts. I mean, these guys are nuts. How they're thinking, I have no idea, except that they are not thinking critically and in terms of material conditions on the ground itself. So Europe would lose even more than it already has lost in terms of economically and the rest of it, and the Chinese would continue moving forward, it seems to me. And now, Taiwan, for instance, if the Americans trying to do something in Taiwan, that would increase also the war danger and create more problems, because if you have war, you have more problems in the global capitalist system, because that means, for instance, you can block the Hormuz Straits, Bab el-Mandeb Straits. 40% or 30% of global trade would be wiped out, and then no more oil would be coming out of, from Saudi Arabia, through the Straits of Hormuz and so forth. And we don't know what's going to happen in Venezuela yet. Forget about that. The oil is not that nothing to write home about in terms of Venezuelan oil, because it's thick. You need like like what you call a spade to move it. It's like moving earth or something like that. But aside from this, we don't know what's going to happen in Venezuela. We don't know what's going to happen in Colombia and Brazil, and so forth. So he, this Trump guy, he had opened up another problem for the United States that would drown it even more in terms of economic crisis, etc. And to sustain a war with, Latin America, war with China, war with Russia, etc. That requires a lot of money. Where are you going to get it from? 38 trillion so far, and it's moving forward even more. Plus, what's happening inside the United States itself. I mean, in terms of the United States itself, on the 20th of January, we're going to have all kinds of demonstrations against Trump, and against, immigration, customs, and enforcement. ICE, because ICE is going on a rampage, shooting people. I mean, it's crazy. And now Trump wants to have paratroopers, army paratroopers go into Minnesota. So he's talking about for instance, how the Iranians are killing their own people, etc. And this guy is moving military, etc. And before that, there was the National Guard, which the National Guard is military as well. So there's a real crisis in terms of the administration itself. It doesn't know how to go, and every step it takes, it really, digs the hole deeper for it. And that is something that's not good for economic development and the economy in the United States, and therefore, if you have problems internally, economically, and politically, and you have all kinds of things happening outside, and that you are the instigator of, and then you are digging the hole deeper also in terms of foreign policy, then you are doomed. I mean, I'm not saying that the U.S. is not going to remain a big power, etc. But and the trajectory it's going, I mean, it's going to be losing, losing big time. I mean, not so much. And that is going to reflect on domestic politics, and people are, really vertically divided in the United States, vertical division. I mean, it's not, it's no joke. I mean, it's a serious thing.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ibrahim, for sharing your insightful reflection with us. And we hope to hear from you again at future events. And we hope that we can talk about pleasant issue in that time.
All right. So I'm gonna say shukran jazilan in Arabic, muchas gracias, and in Hawaiian, mahalo nui loa.
Okay.
Aloha from Hawaii.
Okay. Thanks also to the attendees, and please continue watching the program. I will see you in the next interview. Thank you.